To the Stephanie Wilson Show. Again, thank you so much, Natalie, for coming out to give your opinion. Yeah. Next question. Do you find students have a voice in their education, their interests, their opportunities? Do they need more, less?
I think we're slowly moving towards that. I think with inquiry-based learning being a big push in our education, students are getting more of a say in what they're wanting to know about, what their wonderings are, what questions they want answered about particular topics. But I think it's also still a work in progress. So yeah, I think we're moving a little bit towards that more in the future, and I think you'll start to see kids choosing educational pathways a little bit earlier than they do currently.
Okay, so where do you think that we fall short in education? Like, do we fall short in tapping into more STEM projects, technology, social, financial literacy?
Yeah, I think socially that, especially in today's day and age with kids who seem to have a lot of social concerns, there's a lot of new social pressures present in our society that weren't when we were kids, for example. And I think more social supports in schools to offer kids the education that they need about those things in life, and could be helpful. I think that, you mentioned financial literacy. I think that it would, with the movement towards more inquiry-based things, that the push to more life skills type education is important, right? Like financial literacy in the way that, kids grow up with a knowledge of how to, balance a budget for their life, for their mortgage, for making payments, and things like that. And I think our high schools are moving a little bit more towards that. But I think, like I said earlier in the thing, it's ever evolving. We need to keep working towards it. And as we move in, even further into the 21st century and technology evolves, and the need for what kids need to know for the future evolves. What kids need to be literate in now in order to be successful in their future is completely different than what I needed when I was a kid, right? So,
well, I think it's kind of relative. I think that with me and my journey, had I known more financial literacy types of skills, I wouldn't have had the debt that I had. My budgeting would have been better, and I would have been definitely putting savings away, even at the elementary school level, rather than go spending it on something silly. I would be thinking long term. A lot of times we're self-gratifying. Immediate gratification was what I was trying to get at. That's what we focus on, right? When it comes to video games, that's immediate gratification. When it comes to an ice cream or something like that, having that financial literacy component and see where your future could be, inspiring and motivating to actually save and budget and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And when you put it like that, it makes it very obvious that it's needed more than ever for our kids then, because we're a society of instant gratification more than ever. When we were kids on a Friday night, if you wanted to see a new release movie, you better get to Blockbuster before all the copies were taken. You actually had to work for something. Now you click a button and it's playing on your TV, right?
And phone.
And anything. It's at your fingertips, right? And I think that lends itself into what could probably be a whole nother podcast about how kids are so used to this instant gratification and they never have to deal with much disappointment and those types of things, that when they become an adult and these things become present in their life, mortgages and payments and responsibilities, and they don't know how to handle it, it's where we're seeing the increases in mental health issues and things like that, which, with the more support I mentioned, could help students be more successful, could be alleviated before we get there, kind of thing.
It's like a whole web of stuff.
It's changing society to be proactive instead of reactive. I mean,
exactly.
Again, another podcast, another time, right? Like I could get into a whole veganism debate on this.
Oh boy, I like my meat. I'm sorry,
but it's killing the planet. Proactive.
I know. I get it. One day, maybe I'll try it.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I like my steak.
Yeah, it is delicious. I'm not going to say that I don't like meat for 1 second.
I understand that you have children. Do you or did you try to teach them the way you were taught in Teachers College? And do they look at you as a teacher or as just mom? And mom, you know nothing. Comment on that, and how's your home life as far as education goes with your kids?
Okay, I try to teach and raise my kids the way that I was taught and raised by my parents, not necessarily the way that I was taught by educators per se, although I had a lot of inspiring educators growing up. But I'm fortunate to be blessed with two amazing parents who instilled all kinds of important lessons in me, both academic and emotional, social things like that. So I try to raise my kids in that way. And then I am a teacher, which my parents were not. So my kids definitely do a lot more structured activities in the way of homework and reading and things like that, which wasn't as much present in my household growing up. And so I will get the mom, like, why do I have to do this? And then, and then my 2-year-old will emulate that. And then the 5-year-old is because she's a teacher, is what I'll hear, because she's a teacher. Right?
That sounds so negative.
Yeah, well, but then my kids at the same time have a love of school. They love going to school every day, and they come back and excitedly tell me about. I got told yesterday about how, Pluto used to be a planet and now it's a dwarf planet, and all kinds of information that a 5-year-old regurgitating to you is nothing short of impressive, right? So I think that I'm instilling a love of learning in them and a curiosity for knowledge.
That's good. That's great. See, now I was the best thing since sliced bread until my kids reached teenage years, mainly 15, 16. Then I knew nothing. So they bought into the philosophy, they bought into the educational, the things I was teaching them. They were adhering to it. I could hear myself coming out of their mouths, and then all of a sudden that changed, and I wasn't cool anymore, and I knew nothing.
Yeah.
Whether it be coaching sports or whether it be doing homework. So your kids really aren't at that age right now.
Well, one of them is, yeah. No,
Okay.
I do have a 16-year-old who I'm definitely not cool to, and it is, and I'm a little extra sad about it because it seems like still dad is cool, but mom is definitely not, and. And I mean, he's good for the most part, but he's definitely not looking for our opinions on things. That's for sure. No. And I'm sure my daughters will get there. I have no doubt. But it's sad, right? He used to, like, on a Friday night want to play Monopoly with us, and we would inadvertently, in a fun way, teach him about counting money. And now if he emerges from his cave, aka his room, every now and then, I'm happy to see he's breathing.
Right. Yeah, I call my son a groundhog because he comes out, peeks his head out, grabs some food, and goes back in his room.
I ask if he sees his shadow, and off we go.
Yeah, great. Okay, so now we're going to get back into the classroom. What types of sacrifices have you done to help your students succeed? Whether it be financial.
Yeah, I was going to say the first one that pops into my mind is financial. Huge financial sacrifices. I don't think that people who aren't in education realize the amount of personal dollars that go into a classroom. It's actually, and people who don't understand can be like, well, you don't need that. They provide supplies and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, sure, yeah. If you want your kids to do nothing but color on construction paper all year, then we've got all the supplies necessary.
Right.
But if you would like your kids to be engaged in a, up and coming way and participating in real enriched hands-on critical thinking activities, it requires a lot of other supplies in a classroom, right? And even to just provide the comforts of home. Like, for example, in my classroom, I have comfortable beanbag seating and alternative seating, things like that. So when we are doing seated activities like reading, and whatnot. The kids have another place that they can, sit down, relax, stretch their legs, and they're not always sitting in the desk and chair environment. And that's all money out of my pocket. You know what I mean? So financial sacrifices are a big one. Time is another sacrifice. I take a lot of time away from my family to support and nourish the growth and development of the students in my classroom, the kids in my school community as a whole. So that's a big sacrifice that I think we make as well.
As you see your students make mistakes, they learn, grow socially, what personal connections can you make with them to help them overcome those obstacles, especially socially? Body image, academics, sometimes when they're not being successful academically, how their self-esteem dwindles. What kind of personal connections can you make to help them overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, I think that talking to the students about my personal connections to those things, I have no problem sharing those kinds of things. Obviously not revealing a lot of details to my students about things, but I've shared with students before who are struggling with, let's say, being bullied, that I was bullied in grade school, and how I overcame that, and I'm real, and I'm transparent, and I'm honest about the fact that it wasn't easy, and it took work to remind myself that my opinion of myself mattered more than the opinions of others, and things like that.
Which is difficult for them to buy into, because students, they so value having those friendships, and because they're so young, especially girls, I shouldn't stereotype, but sometimes girls kind of hang on to that because we're so rapport oriented, where it's all about the rapport, not necessarily task oriented.
Absolutely.
Right. During the break, you mentioned something about your daughter, your conversation with your daughter, and your innocence. Why don't you tell the audience? They'd love to hear it.
The other day we were driving in the car and we were watching Beauty and the Beast, and she asked me why Belle didn't like Gaston in the movie, and I said because she says in the movie that he's rude and conceited, and I explained to her that being conceited means you love yourself way too much and you think you're better than other people. And she went on and said, well, I love myself. And I said, well, that's good, you should love yourself, but we shouldn't think we're better than other people. And she's like, oh, but I don't. And so I said, well, why do you love yourself? And she said, because I love who I am. And I said, well, who are you? And she said, well, I'm kind, and I'm loving, and I'm silly, and I'm an artist, and I'm a pescatarian. This is her new word right now, because she's only eating fish. And she even expressed that, she said, I'm not very good at cleaning, but I'm working on it, and I try hard even when I'm not good. And she even acknowledged loving her own flaws. And it just, and then she went back into watching the movie, and it just struck me like so hard that I was like, even as an adult woman, I battle my own mental dialogue sometimes, being negative with myself or being too hard on myself, cutting myself down. And here she is, just loving up on herself all innocently. And it made me think really deep as a mother, as an educator who teaches kids that still have this confidence, like, when do we lose that innocence, or when do we start to value the opinions of others over our own, about who we are as a person, or about our expectations for ourselves? And
it's an interesting question.
Yeah, and how do we get them to grip their talons into that confidence and hang on to it in the face of the challenges that we come across growing up and going through school and things like that. So
right. That reminds me of the recording artist Pink, how she's always in the limelight, but she also teaches her daughter to have that self-confidence, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to be who you are, you need to love yourself. And she brings that into the forefront in her music, in her interviews, and I admire, like, she's using that as a platform, her celebrity as a platform to build and as you said, allow them to sink their talons into that confidence and innocence and purity and keep it.
Yeah, I agree. It's important, I think, and I think our society as a whole is moving towards that self-acceptance as well as acceptance of others. I feel we're trying to anyways, shed ourselves of our prejudices of other people and just accept everyone and in turn accept ourselves, right? And just be who we are and not let it bother you if somebody isn't the way you are, because that would be boring if everyone was the same.
That's for sure. That's for sure.